Hello, I'm Sophia Lou and welcome to my channel.
Hello guys and welcome to this week's Sketchbook Sunday. This week the topic, as chosen by you guys and highly requested, I'm going to show you how I draw mermaids. Next week's topic will have to be filmed in advance because I will be at London MCM Comic Con. For information about London Comic Con, don't worry, I'll be posting a video so you can check that out. Today I'm using the Tiger sketchbook. I'll give my thoughts and review on this when I do a sketchbook tour. Right now it doesn't have much in just because I've been so busy preparing for the convention, and I'll be using some pencils. If you guys want to suggest any future topics for videos, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be doing the winning topic of the last Sketchbook Sunday for next Sunday's video, if that makes any sense. So for now, grab your sketchbook, grab your pencils, and let's discuss. Okay, considering it's been Mermaid and there have been a lot of mermaids floating around, it's just one of those it's a question I get kind of asked a lot, like how do I draw my mermaids? So the thing I always start with is a standard torso. I'll bring up my arms, bring out everything else on my standard torso, and then I'll start with my tail. Now when I'm thinking of tails, I'm thinking the tail is always moving, it's always got shape to it, it's always got flow, so I always think of a nice S shape. You always want the shapes to be moving and always want the shapes to be flowing, because if your shapes aren't flowing, it doesn't give the image much it doesn't give the image much language, if that makes any sense. You want the image to be describable to the person via the silhouette without them even knowing what the piece is. So for example, I'm just going to build this tail like this, and then at the end here you'll want the main fin, and the reason why you want the main fin is you're going to kind of want to base them on real fishes, how they move, how their tails move and anything like that. I actually like to add some extra fins to my tails, and I also really like to add like some little like sort of like elvish ears to my mermaids, just so then they've got like a little bit more flow to them, as well as I really like to add webbed fingers as well, just because I can imagine that would really help them swim. So yet again, you're thinking about your fish, you're going to build its torso up first. Now depending on where the tail goes from is depending on where your person's body is. So the way I would normally think of it is like, this is your rib cage, this is your hips, and then the hip extends into tail instead of legs. That way you're thinking about like the muscular proportions of the fish. So when you're thinking about where your tail ends, there isn't actually a set proportion for this. I like to mix it up sometimes and have the scales go from the top here to the bottom, or you can have like standard mermaid where the tail goes like this, just where the hips stop, or I actually like to build my scales up, so instead of them having to make themselves a bra, they have like scales where the bra would be. It just makes your life a little bit easier instead of having to think about what materials a mermaid may use to be able to actually build up the piece. I just think it makes it flow more and just makes it look a little bit more nicer than what it actually was. I do have some examples of some Little Mermaid illustrations that I did. Let's find it. I don't know where I put it. Ah, here they are. Okay. This is the only problem when you're preparing for convention, stuff is everywhere. So like these are some like little mini mermaids I've done for illustrations, and you can see like the way I've done the scales. I've started them at the top here, and then I've built them down, and then I've done the same with this one, where I'm thinking about the colorization of the tail goes all the way through up the body. And don't be afraid to do different colors and switch colors up and switch your tail up. Maybe try fins on them, maybe try you don't want any maybe you don't want any fins and you just want it to look like a standard mermaid, or you know, there's always ways that you can decorate it and switch it up to make it look different. Think about the way that the fish is as well, so I'm just going to leave them through there. So think about the way your fish is as well. So some fishes look different, and so yet again I'm going to build my torso up like this, and then I'm thinking about how the tail's going to be. Always think of the S shapes, make it flow, make it look interesting, make it look like it's a still from a piece of animation. when it comes to mermaids, when you draw a tail and the tail is stiff like this, and the body is stiff as well like that, it doesn't look right. And as you can see, the tail looks far too long for that torso. Think about your proportions as well. I would say like the tail, if you're gonna do it, you don't want it to be too big in comparison to the torso area. And the only exceptions I would normally make for this is, say if you were doing something that's like an eel type, or if you were doing sort of like an octopus type, it would really help to have that flow and have that longer tail, because it would sell that sort of shape. But if you want to think about it as if you were doing legs, you don't want to make your legs massively too long, because it will make your body proportions look off. So when you're thinking of the tail, think about body proportions. Like, even though this is much bigger than the torso and the head, it doesn't look overly big. But if her tail went all the way down here, it would look odd, it would look out of proportion. So when I'm thinking of the actual tails themselves, I'm thinking of like how I would want the illustration to flow, how I would like the mermaid to be sat, the language of the movement. You've got to think about how they would move in the water. So if you've got a mermaid and they are swimming, say this way, it's not going to make sense for their hair to go that way, to go in this direction. It's going to make more sense for the hair to go in this direction because of the force of the way that the water is. As well, with water, you actually have a lot more freedom with the hair, because the water is going to naturally make the hair lift unless it's moving in a forward motion. The water is naturally going to make your hair lift. Think about when you are in a bath or in a swimming pool. Think about how your hair would lift up while your clothing moves. Think about how all of that reacts within the water, and then apply that to the illustration. So if I'm doing a mermaid moving this way, the way I would normally do it, and if a mermaid was swimming, I would have their arms pointing to the way that they're swimming. And then even then, when I am showing that they're moving that way, I would create an interesting flow for the tail, just so it would look like it's moving in sort of like an S current shape. I can imagine if mermaids, say, were real, they would move with the current of the waves. So I actually, before I do mermaid every single year, I like going through aquariums, or I like watching like loads of like sea life videos, and then thinking about how the fish would move and how everything would move in its any way, shape or form. So once you've built up your shape, and you've built up your basic shape, you can start embellishing them. So if a mermaid does have like a bra, think about the materials that they're going to find underwater, materials that are going to make sense. Jewellery makes sense, jewels make sense because you can find jewels underwater. Bits of torn cloth makes sense, seaweed makes sense. As for actual clothing, probably little bits and pieces, but clothing does tend to deteriorate underwater. But if you're thinking a mythological world, it doesn't really matter so much. So I actually don't like to put my clothing on my mermaids. I actually like to build scales, and there are very simple ways that you can show scaling. One of them is simple cross hatching like this, not all over the mermaid, but in certain areas. Others, people, and other things that you can do are scaling, where you're just doing like this. This is quite time consuming, but it can look extremely effective. And you don't have to do this in every single area. You can just like build up some smaller ones and then build up bigger ones, and you don't have to do it all over. It will just show a little bit more breakup in the tail. As well as there's another method you can do, and it's my personal favourite, and that is circles. I much prefer doing the circle method because I just find it's much easier to do. The cross-hatching method does look really good, and I've seen a few people use that effectively. And you don't have to put scales all over the tail, because sometimes that can look a little bit convoluted. Just add them in a few areas and break them up. So I hope this kind of helps you guys with your mermaid drawings, and for those who are still doing it, I'm so proud of you. You're all doing so well, and for those who weren't able to take part this month, don't worry. I think that with art challenges, the whole idea is to push yourself, and if this is not the month because you are too busy, that's absolutely fine. Maybe try it another month or try another monthly challenge. And for those who even just participated, well done, you did something. You've done really well, and I think anyone who's at least tried or, you know, done something and pushed themselves out of their norm. May can be quite a busy month for a lot of people, especially with exams and with conventions and with work, so it's completely understandable when people can't actually do the art challenges. But either way, you should be proud of yourself for even trying to take part or doing something. You've done really well, and that's all that matters. So next week's topic was actually last week. It should have been last week's topic. So that will happen for next week, so I'll have to pre-film it all. If you guys have any suggestions for topics you would like me to cover in future videos, please let me know in the comment section down below. Hope you guys have found this video a little bit useful, and as always folks, stay creative.